Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to this episode of What's on the Menu with Dr. Danny. We are still in our Challenge Food series. This episode, we're going to talk about pastas and breads and give you some great, healthy, tasty alternatives to all of those starchy carbs. So stick around. Today on What's on the Menu, we are diving deep into pastas. We're going to make zucchini noodles, eggplant lasagna, and beet ravioli, my absolute favorite. If you're anything like me, eating real pasta means going back for seconds, maybe even thirds before you feel full. And then at the end of it, you're just feeling bloated and gross. So you're gonna love these options that we're gonna talk about today. These are gonna make you feel satiated, full, and are packed full of all of the nutrients that your body needs. Let's get started. For our zucchini noodles, we need just a couple of ingredients. I've got some fresh zucchini here. We've got one of these vegetable noodle slicers. I've got some tomatoes that we're gonna throw into our garlic butter sauce and some great spices. Just a few, black pepper and salt, of course, and then my all-time favorite, cumin. And we're gonna combine that with some butter and fresh garlic for a delicious, yummy, lightweight sauce. We're gonna start by slicing up our zucchini in this veggie slicer. I got this one at one of the big box stores. It wasn't expensive. I think it was right around 10 bucks or so. And this one is great that it's got a thin, we could do real thin noodles or thick noodles and slice them up to make whatever kind of noodle pasta you want. So we're just gonna get started by washing our veggies, and we're gonna slice up the zucchini. And I'm just giving these a little rinse here. I tend to buy organic produce anyway, and I don't feel the need to overly wash my veggies. So we're just gonna start with a single one of these, and I'm gonna use the thin side here, and we're going to just turn this inside the spiralizer to slice off our noodles. We're gonna take this down to the core, but not really slicing any of the seed part of this. Also do this with carrots. You could do this with squash. You could do it with really any kind of fibrous vegetable. I've even done this with apple slices to make a fun like dessert pasta. And there we have our delicious pasta noodles. I'm just gonna do that with the rest of the veggies, and we'll come back and get started on the sauce. Here we are getting ready for our sauce, and what we're gonna do is peel a couple of cloves of garlic. We've got a half stick of butter that we're gonna chop up. We're gonna put everything into our saucepan on about a medium heat and let the butter melt really well. Let the garlic simmer and infuse into that butter, and then we'll add our spices. We're gonna do just some black corn, pepper, and salt, and a little bit of cumin. To peel this garlic, I'm just giving it a good whack with the flat side of the blade of my knife, and that papery outside just peels right off. We've got a few good sized cloves here. I think I'm gonna do, that one's a good one. I'll do this one, and this is a good sized one. And you know, the thing about cooking is that it's really about your own personal taste. And so it's so important when we're doing this to really get in and play with our food. If you don't, if you make it and you're like, that didn't really turn out, think about, what was it about that dish that you just didn't like? Was it too heavy on the garlic? Did it need more seasoning? Did it need more garlic? Did it need more salt and pepper? Did it need, what did it need to really give it that flavor or make it more appealing to you? And sometimes it's just a matter of trial and error too. I've been told that I'm overly critical of what I cook, and I don't think that's the case. I'm just always looking for what is it in this that I would have liked to have seen? What would have just made this for me? So I tend to speak about my food in that way. Not so much that I don't like how it turned out. I think that's the impression that some people get sometimes, but more so that I'm just always looking at, is there something here that could be done better, or is it exactly how I wanted it? And how I want it is a subjective thing. So with whatever it is that you're doing for you, keep that in mind. Everybody has different tastes. Our tastes even change over time. So taking the time to play with your food and say, okay, yeah, I really liked this the way it was done. Or, no, I didn't really care for that, but this part was pretty good, or I would have done this differently, or, it needed this seasoning, or maybe it needed some of this or some of that. Next time I could. I love doing that, where I'm eating something and I'm like, if I'd have just put capers in this, or, hey, black olives would have been great in this. And just kind of keeping that in mind as you're doing this, so that you continue to play with your food and you're always, it's always an adventure then. So I've got my garlic here pretty much finely chopped. And I'm gonna go ahead and get the butter in here. And I'm gonna add my seasonings last. So we're gonna let this butter kind of melt down and caramelize a little bit. And then I'll add my seasonings. So here we are on the stove, ready to get this started. I am gonna put this on a medium-high and just let it melt down. We'll stir everything up as the butter starts to melt, and let that garlic start to brown up and really infuse into the butter before we add our other ingredients. While we're waiting on that sauce to get going, I'm gonna actually prep some of our garnish here. We're gonna put into our pasta after it's all done. So I've got just a bunch of different small cherry tomatoes, grape tomatoes, stuff like that. And I'm going to quarter these. Maybe for some of the small ones, I'll half them. And we're just gonna toss those in and then toss everything. Once our pasta is ready. So we can see our sauce here is starting to boil. I've turned the heat down to about medium-low, almost completely to low. And we're gonna let this simmer a little bit. And we're ready to go ahead and add in our spices, because I'm starting to smell that garlic aroma, flavor get into the air. So let's go ahead and do that. Now I've gone ahead and put the pepper in here. And again, I don't really measure, just kind of eyeball it. It's all to taste. And I'm gonna add my salt and some cumin. And again, I'm just kind of eyeballing it, and we'll taste it and see what it needs more of here in a second. But our garlic, you can see, is really starting to kind of get that translucent look a little bit, and the smell is just absolutely delicious. So this will be ready very shortly. See the garlic starting to brown up a little bit there as well. Maybe about a minute or two more, and we'll be ready to go ahead and plate and dress everything. All right, so there's our sauce all done. You can see the garlic is just caramelized. We've still got a lot of liquid in there, plenty of butter. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and combine these two. And I'm just gonna drizzle this over. And then we're gonna grab some tongs and mix this up. Now let's go ahead and finish off our plate here. Let's go ahead and finish off our plate here. We're just going to toss in our tomatoes. And ta-da! This is one dish that going back for seconds or thirds is not going to make you feel like you just totally broke the calorie bank. For our beet ravioli, we just need a few ingredients. We're going to start out with beets. I would, depending on the size of the ravioli that you want to make here, you want a small to maybe a medium size beet, and we're going to slice these nice and thin. We've got some fresh dill here and about a half a cup each of fresh ricotta and soft goat cheese. You could also use cream cheese here or another soft cheese. I find that these two make probably the best blend. As far as our spices go, we're going to just stick with some basics: salt, pepper, some cumin, and some dried basil. And then for our glaze on this, we are going to give ourselves a delicious golden balsamic vinegar reduction glaze on this. So we're going to start making the ravioli, the noodle part of this ravioli or beet ravioli dish. And I'm starting with my mandolin here. We're setting it on the lowest setting, so we're getting the thinnest slice that we possibly can. And I'm simply going to slide my beet and get nice, very thin slices with this. And set those aside over here in my bowl. Again, I'm using about 3 beets for this, and this is going to serve maybe 4 people, depending on how many you want to eat. These are kind of appetizer sized, so you know, it really depends. You can make a whole meal out of this, or it can just be a side. We're going to set those aside and let them drain while we move on to making our filling for this and getting our balsamic glaze started. I'm going to reduce down this balsamic vinegar. So what we're going to do is put about a half a cup to a full cup, depending on how many servings that you're going to make. Half a cup will do about 8 to 12 raviolis because we're going to reduce this down quite a bit. So we're just going to turn the heat on to about a medium low to medium, and add our golden balsamic vinegar. And you can use any kind of vinegar that you want with this. I love the taste of this golden balsamic. It gets a very rich honey taste as it reduces. We're gonna go ahead and mix up our filling now. What I've done is I've combined the ricotta and the goat cheese here in a bowl, and we're just gonna mix this together until it's well blended. You can do this with a hand mixer, you can do it in your stand mixer. I am perfectly okay just grabbing a fork and getting in there and mixing that really well. Once we've got this mixed up so that it's very evenly distributed, then we're gonna go ahead and throw in our fresh dill. And I'm using maybe maybe a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of that. We've got about a half a teaspoon of salt and pepper. And then we're just gonna kind of eyeball the cumin and ground basil. So I'm gonna just kind of, yeah, that looks about right. And the same thing with the basil. And we'll get that all mixed in completely. And again, you know, taste this as you go. Make sure it's tasting the way you like it. Maybe you want to add some other spices or herbs or seasoning into that. You certainly could. You could do a little bit of lemon juice in this. You could also add some sun-dried tomatoes. You could do really anything you want. I've made this replacing the dill with fresh basil. I've also made it with rosemary. It's fantastic with tarragon. So the sky's really the limits. You know, guys, you really, I can't stress how important it is to get in and just really play with your food and find what you like. And then keep playing with it to find other things that you like. Don't get stuck in that rut where you're like, oh, I like this, and that's all you eat. Get a good variety in there. All right, so now that this is all mixed up, we're gonna set this aside and check on our sauce. Our next step is to actually stuff our ravioli. So we're gonna start by lining up a few of our beets. And just add in a dollop of our filling. How much of this filling that you put in really kind of depends completely on the size of the beets that you're using and you know, how much stuffing do you want in this. I would recommend not overstuffing them, simply because then when you go to eat it, you've got the filling running all over the place. So now that we've got our filling down, I'm going to take another slice and we're going to top off our ravioli here. Trying to keep the size of the beets about the same all the way around so they're nice and neat. And then we have these beautiful little stuffed raviolis. We're gonna now take this and glaze it with our balsamic vinaigrette glaze. Here we are with our balsamic that has started to reduce down, and you can see it is nice and thick and perfect for drizzling. Now that we've got all of our raviolis stuffed and ready to go, we're going to drizzle these with a little bit of our golden balsamic vinaigrette reduction, and they'll be ready to serve up. We're going to move on to our eggplant lasagna, and so we have a couple of steps in this. We have to prepare our sauce, we're going to prepare our chicken, and of course we have to prep our eggplant. Now I'm using chicken in this recipe as the meat. You could use ground beef, you could use ground turkey, you could go completely meatless with this, whatever works for you. We're going to start prepping our meat by drizzling about a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half of olive oil into a pan and preheating that on about medium heat. I'm going to do a very simple seasoning on this, and I'm using chicken breast because I like to have chunky chicken in my eggplant lasagna. You could use ground chicken, you could use ground beef, you could really use any kind of ground meat, or you could chop them up and do chunks. But we're gonna kind of mince this a little bit in the pan as we're making it. So let's get started. I'm using ground cumin, some garlic powder, and of course, salt. You can season this to your taste, and as always, I am not measuring, I'm just kind of eyeballing it and going, that looks about right. And once these are seasoned, I'm gonna flip them over and season the other side as well. And then we'll get them in the pan. All right, so we have seasoned both sides of meat. I've got this in the pan here. I'm gonna give it just a minute on about medium-low heat to brown up on one side. We'll flip it, and then I'm gonna take this little tool here and actually break up the meat. I'm gonna give it kind of the same texture as like a pulled pork or shredded chicken. Here we are with our chicken all cooked up and shredded. And we want this slightly undercooked because we are putting it into the dish, and then we're gonna put it in the oven where the chicken will finish cooking. I'm gonna get started prepping the sauce here. I'm starting out with a base of just my favorite canned sauce. Choose whatever your favorite is. This is a vodka sauce. And I'm gonna add to this some garlic powder and dried basil, just to give it a little more flavor. And we're gonna let that simmer for a little bit while we are prepping our eggplant. So I'm gonna mix all this in. I'm gonna put it on about medium-low heat. We'll give this a good zhuzh and let it cook up to get those flavors mixed in there. And this is our happy little eggplant, and we're gonna do a couple of things to prep this. I am going to slice it on the mandolin slicer again to get our lasagna noodles out of this. We're gonna start by just taking this top portion off, and that's gonna go into our bowl for the composter. And then I'm going to cut this in half. And then half again. And this is just to give us a nice flat surface for the mandolin. I'm cutting these in quarters because this is about a medium-sized eggplant, and it's a little bit wider than my planer, or my mandolin plane. So I'm giving plenty of space for the mandolin to do its job without having any overrun that tends to rip your produce. To slice this on the mandolin, I'm actually going to put this on the second setting. So it's going to be about a medium thick slice, and we're just going to run this all the way through to give us nice thin slices. We've got our noodles sliced up nice and thin here. So what we're gonna do next is get everything assembled. I've assembled all of my parts here. We've got our sauce, some cheese, our eggplant noodles, and of course our chicken. And I'm going to start assembling this. And I'm going to start by adding just a thin layer of sauce to the bottom of our pan and spreading that out. The dogs are so excited to smell food, especially the chicken. All right. Now we're going to layer in our noodles. I'm going to put on top of that some of our chicken, and I keep my hands washed really regularly, and I'm, in my own kitchen, and I just, we grab a handful and spread it out. I'm going to top that off with some more sauce. We're going to give it a little more this time. Go ahead and spread that around. And then we're going to add a layer of cheese on top of this. And I love my cheese. Now you could do this completely vegan and leave out the cheese, or leave out the meat rather, and just do the cheese. Or you could leave out the cheese and, be completely vegan. Some vegetarians, vegans will eat cheese. All right, so now that we've got this first layer done, I'm just gonna repeat that starting. And here we are, we've got everything layered up, our top layer of cheese. Remember, this was the eggplant noodles. I did a layer of shredded chicken, some sauce, and a layer of cheese, and repeated that till we got to the end. Now you absolutely do not have to put a meat in this. Eggplant is packed full of good nutrients, including all 8 essential amino acids, so it acts as a protein in this meal all on its own. We're gonna take this and put it in the oven for about 30 to 40 minutes until the cheese is melty and good and kind of caramelized and brown on top. And we're gonna cook that at 350. Here we are with our finished product. Our eggplant lasagna, all cooked up, cheese nice and brown on top, and ready to eat. Hey there, my lovelies. Thanks for joining us on this episode of What's on the Menu. I hope you enjoyed it. I sure had a blast. Make sure you come back in 2 weeks and join us. Like, subscribe, share, click the little bell so you get notifications every time a new video drops. Next episode, we are going to be talking about everybody's favorite, chocolate. So until next time, be kind to yourself, be kind to each other. Remember to play with your food. And for exclusive content and extended footage, make sure you click the link below to our Patreon account where you can access that.